Hello everyone, my name's Rebecca Markey and I'm Chair of the Committee of Enterprise. I'd love to welcome you all to the RDS this afternoon. I'm delighted to have you here with us for the 3rd annual Finding Common Ground Festival. Just some small housekeeping before we start. So this session is going to run until 6 o'clock, as close as. We're going to try and bring back time if we can. The bathrooms are available in the Members Club and the exit is just the door that you came in. All right. Please make sure your mobile phones are on silent. You can still access Menti if that's the case. And if you're posting on social media, which we encourage you to do, of course, please use our hashtag Finding Common Ground. So for almost 300 years, the RDS has been turning ideas into action by bringing together agriculture, science, industry, and the arts for public good. We do this because a thriving Ireland requires a shared vision, and Common Ground is the only place where that vision can grow. This week, the Finding Common Ground Festival will explore how Ireland can address shared environmental and societal challenges, especially climate action, sustainable resource use and skills gaps, through open dialogue and collaboration. I'm delighted to introduce our facilitator for the session on future skills, and it's Shauna Dunlop. So not only is Shauna the Director of Research, Future Skills Needs, Statistics and Risk at SOLAS, she also sits on the Committee of Enterprise, and we're delighted to have her. So she'll guide you through today's discussion and how we're going to equip people with the skills needed for a fast-changing digital economy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, and good afternoon to everyone. What's lovely is that the sun has come out, and it's obviously just, for the festival. So that is great news. And I'm delighted to be here to be able to facilitate what's hopefully going to be a very engaging session for you all, because we know that digital and AI are skills that really we're all talking about across the country and also in our own homes in the evening, aren't we? So hopefully we've a great panel of speakers who are going to be joining me shortly, but we hope that you'll find this very engaging. So I think I maybe just talk you through the agenda. Yep. So just to talk you through a little bit of what we'll be doing up until 6 o'clock. First of all, we will be having a look at something very, very inspiring, I think, that the RDS are really responsible for, and many of you will be aware of it, and it's the wonderful competition called Science Blast. It's held here in the RDS, and it involves hundreds of different primary school children who come together to create a really special project with their teachers. It's led here in the RDS, and I'm very pleased to have been a judge actually for the last couple of years for it, but we'll be sharing a little video. And how better to think about digital skills and AI than to hear from our young people who are in school at the moment and their teachers. As part of that then, I'll also be introducing the programme manager who has led all the work in terms of Science Blast, so that's Amy Harrington. And I'll also be joined also by Sarah Keating, who is responsible for pretty much a lot of everything that's happening across the festival. So there'll be an opportunity just to hear from Sarah and from Amy about not just how the RDS is delivering really important initiatives, such as what we're doing today in Finding Common Ground, but also through Science Blast. And maybe we'll hear a little bit about your own journey as well, and the skills that have really mattered to yourselves in the roles that you have in the RDS. Then Rebecca has introduced me, so I do have a role in terms of national skills in the work that I do in SOLAS. So before I introduce our panel members, I'll just be setting the scene a little bit for some of the really, I suppose, some of the key things that we have to think about in terms of future skills, digital AI, and that very important part of that will form our discussion today about the digital divide itself and the need for people skills, for transversal skills. So I'll just be bringing you through a short few statements just before I introduce the panel. And I'm delighted to be introducing such a wonderful panel as well for our discussion this afternoon. All three of our panelists bring absolute individual expertise in terms of the work that they all do. So you'll be hearing their perspectives and hopefully be able to engage yourselves with the conversation a little bit more on digital AI and the digital divide potentially that we have. So we have joining us Dr. Kevin Marshall, who is the chair of the National Skills Council for Ireland, and he's also head of future skilling in Microsoft. We have Dr. Ciarán Dunne, who is the director of transversal skills, the first director of transversal skills I think we've ever had in Ireland in our university sector from DCU, and also Professor Joyce O'Connor, who is a real leading founder in terms of education and a lot of the different initiatives that we have across the country, and is currently leading Block W, which is really a charitable purpose organisation that is really looking at making sure women and girls have an opportunity to access emerging technologies, as well as lots of other things. They all bring lots of other aspects to their roles and their experience, so we'll be hearing from them as well. So thank you all for being with us today. I should also say as well, just before we go to this wonderful video, I think we're going to start with Amy for Science Blast. I should also say that we're delighted to be running this session with you all here, and it's great to see so many people here actually. And it's a joint initiative as part of the RDS Foundation with our Committee of Enterprise and also our Committee of Science and Technology, and it's a great way to be bringing the message of the RDS to this particular summit. So I think if I push a button, do I push a button? Yeah. Okay. Yes. I let Amy push the button, and we'll look at this video.
Most important job. Thanks, Shauna. No, so just to introduce the video, and thanks to Shauna, my name is Amy Harrington, and I'm the Science and Technology Program Manager here in the RDS. And I suppose I just wanted to introduce the video. Maybe, when we talk about future skills, the conversation generally jumps to older students. It jumps to second level, third level in the workplace. But in reality, the foundations of these skills need to be laid much, much earlier. And one of these skills that we're talking about, that in the RDS especially we see as incredibly important, is curiosity. So this is the ability to ask questions, to test ideas, and to really make sense of the complex world around us. So the RDS developed ESB Science Blast to support students in developing curiosity, so to help them moving from observing the world around them to actually questioning it, being analytical, being skeptical. And through this questioning and investigative methods through Science Blast, they're also developing a lot of transversal skills, which we'll talk about later and we'll also talk about on the panel. So just to say that Science Blast is about future-proofing the next generation. It's really about preparing young people for a future that's shaped by AI, that's shaped by digital technologies, and that's what the RDS sees as one of the big challenges of our time. So now I just have this short video that's kind of highlighting curiosity in action at ESB Science Blast. So this took place in March in the RDS, and we had about 12,000 students with us across 4 days, so it's quite a big national event.
At primary level, ESB Science Blast supports teachers to develop that curiosity, helping students move from simply observing the world to questioning it. Skills such as critical thinking, problem solving, collaboration and creativity are key as Ireland works to bridge the digital divide. Here are just some examples of how ESB Science Blast nurtures children's curiosity.
What question were you trying to answer?
How do you create an electrical circuit? We have this storage box in our class and we were kind of just finding stuff out of it, and we were like, oh, like this could be a good idea. So we kind of just wired it up.
I think we learned electrical skills and maybe a bit of engineering, which should be good for next year and first year when some of us do engineering. Craftsmanship as well, to craft the car or lollipop sticks. We used a hot glue gun to stick it together. So those are the skills I'd say we learned.
I am here with Elliot from Glasnevin National School. Elliot, what is your question?
Oh, we're wondering if, like, are smartwatches as accurate as, like, professional equipment?
And how did you come up with that question? What made you curious about this?
Because our teacher had a friend who worked as a cardiologist. So he brought in an ECG machine, which stands for electrocardiogram, and they measure your heart rate. First of all, we got our resting heart rate, and then we did 30 jumping jacks and did our active heart rate.
Were there any parts of the project where you maybe had to encourage the kids to be a little bit skeptical about the research they were doing?
We were very conscious that, you can't take everything that's online at face value. So, they had to kind of corroborate things from trusted sources, and, we had to look at a range of websites that we kind of considered to be trusted sources in terms of the scientific and the medical kind of end of things. That was a good lesson for them in itself.
I am here with Charlotte and Harrison from St Andrew's College in Blackrock. Guys, tell me, what was your question?
Our question was, why is space so dark when there are stars in space?
And how did you come up with it? What made you curious about this topic?
Well, teacher asked us for homework to come up with an idea of something to do for EBS Science Blast. So everyone kind of brought in one, and then some of them she put on the board, you voted, and this is the winning one.
What makes the skills developed at ESB Science Blast vital for children's long-term success?
Well, I think there's a few things. So yes, there is that very important introduction to science, but I think also it's the experience itself. It's been able to come to an amazing setting like here in the RDS, be able to showcase what you've actually learned and be able to show talent, creativity and skills in a way probably young people have never had a chance to do so before.
And how can those skills empower young people to participate fully in a more AI-based future? And how can that help to close the digital gap?
Having skills to be able to think about science and technology together is really important. But I think maybe of equal, if not more importance, is the transversal nature of the skills that you're gathering here. Because the digital world needs creativity, curiosity, being able to question, being able to think through critical thinking in a way that, we've never had before. So those skills are actually fundamental to our children's future.
Through ESB Science Blast, the next generation are gaining the confidence to question, test and verify the world around them, building key critical thinking skills.
It's a wonderful thing to be involved in, and I think I'll say that first. Anyone who isn't a judge at Science Blast, it's highly recommended. I remember one of the questions that one of the schools was trying to solve a couple of years ago was, and they're so diverse, aren't they? They're so diverse. Was, do you sleep better if you keep one leg outside of the bed? So there's all these really brilliant ideas. So I'm going to ask Amy to come up on the stage with me now, and I'm also going to ask Sarah to come and join us, please. Because I think it's really important that we do some discussion and reflection on what we've just seen, and also to think about how something like this happens, where the RDS is able to bring people together, and think about all of these issues that the RDS has been so involved in for so many years. Like Rebecca said it out at the beginning, 300 years, almost 300 years of the RDS. And it's still going, and look at how strong and vibrant it is in terms of skills and digital and the future, all our future really across society. So Amy, I'll maybe go to you first. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about how on earth you can deliver something as huge as Science Blast and make sure that everyone has the experience that they do, which is so positive. Yeah. And what sort of skills, do you think, where are skills, I suppose, in the program itself?
Yeah. Well, so obviously the ESB Science Blast. It's an RDS initiative, and the RDS have been supporting innovations in science for over 300 years, and I'm not going to go through 300 years of history, but right now the challenge that I mentioned that we see is, you know, future-proofing the next generation and developing these skills, and how we do that is through ESB Science Blast. So it's a national STEM education program for primary school children, and it's hands-on and the whole class get involved, and it's where the children investigate the science behind a question that they're interested in. So Shauna's already mentioned some, but other questions we got this year are, does a dog have a dominant paw, or what biscuits are the best dunkers? You know, it's just whatever the children are interested in. We've got a lot of AI kind of based questions as well, and ones around digital technologies. Does watching brain rot my brain, and can they tell the difference between AI generated text and human generated text, so we can, you know, kind of see what the kids are interested in these days as well. And what they do in Science Blast is they come up with their question in the classroom, then they investigate it, and they bring it to one of our national showcases where they present it to a judge. And I have to tell you, Shauna, it's not competitive, and that's really important. That's really important for us. So everyone presents to a judge, and while Science Blast is framed around science, and yes, they're learning scientific skills and they're learning a lot of terminology and a lot of knowledge about the science space, one of the most important things they're learning are these transversal skills. So by carrying out these investigations and presenting them at our showcases, they're really developing problem solving, they're developing critical thinking, creativity, curiosity, collaboration, communication, all these skills that are really important, not just for school, but for life. And I suppose maybe some of the things that are really important to us in ESB Science Blast are that we want our vision is for every primary school student in the country to be able to participate in ESB Science Blast at least once. So, you know, inclusivity is a bedrock of our program. So we have 3 national events. We have Dublin, Limerick and Belfast. We have a day for Gaelscoilne. So in Dublin, one of our days is completely Os Gaeilge, all Irish projects, Irish judges, everything. We have a lot of DEIS participation. We have great female representation. And recently we've been working on a grant with Research Ireland where we're trying to engage a number of special education schools. So we're really talking about just removing barriers and allowing everyone to participate, because, you know, bridging the digital divide, it's bringing everyone into the conversation, and that's what we're trying to do at this young age. And I suppose the non-competitive piece is important as well, because, you know, again, removing those barriers to participation, and it's not about winning and all that pressure is removed. It's about participation, it's about engaging, it's about the learning. They're not afraid to make mistakes, you know, it's about the journey that they've been on. So it's a really, really incredible program, and we have been, this year we're going to surpass 110,000 students participating since 2019. So we're hoping to make a bit of a dent in future skills.
Absolutely, and what a wonderful way to introduce young people to skills, maybe skills that they wouldn't think about, and that lovely balance of inclusion as part of the skills. So, like, skills are so central to it, and I mean, well done on hitting that figure. Yeah. And, you know, let's keep it going. Let's keep it going. So then, moving on to yourself, then, Sarah. So, Sarah, you have the job here in the RDS of being the program lead for the Enterprise Committee of Enterprise, and you're very responsible for a lot of what's happening over today and tomorrow as part of the festival. So, you know, so well done on that, first of all, and thank you for all your effort on it. But I suppose in thinking about the festival and, you know, how that's been, you know, how that has come together, and how we're here today, this afternoon, you know, at near 5 o'clock on an evening, talking about skills. Like, what sort of perspective did you take in terms of the festival for skills? Like, how important was it to the whole programme?
Yeah, sure. So thank you, first of all. I suddenly am a lot more grateful to the speakers I've asked to speak for the festival, because this is scary, but I'm delighted to be here. So I have the pleasure of looking after the Agriculture and Rural Affairs programme, as well as the Enterprise programme with the committees in the RDS. And through these, we have a collection of amazing programmes. We have our Circular Economy one, where we support emerging SME and social enterprises in the circular space. We also have a forestry program, and we have a sustainable agriculture and rural development program, and they all centre around skills. So they are award programs, but they're more than that. They're development programs, and so we run different things. Like we partner with Trinity Executive Education on the circular space, looking at how we can upskill these businesses, and 'cause a lot of the time they're light on the ground, and so they need to be everything to everyone. So the courses that they do with Trinity through this program are great, and they get to upskill. They get that opportunity, but also we invite them back for alumni days and to sessions like this so that they can upskill constantly and learn, I suppose, about the different societal and environmental challenges, which is what our festival aims to do.
So it's really, again, so central. So thinking about the future and future skills, like I think those two major initiatives, what we're doing here today, what we're seeing through Science Blast, you know, it really shows the importance, and that, you know, it's interesting, the digital side and the AI question and starting to come through, and of course we're seeing that through circular economy as well, and where the opportunities are. So maybe then, just to yourself, Amy, could you just tell us a little bit about, you know, I suppose your own journey into the RDS and what skills, you know, what skills maybe have been important to you on that journey?
Yeah, so kind of my journey to program management wasn't really a straight line, and is actually a good highlight of the importance of transversal skills, I think. So I started out curious child, very interested in science, and did a science degree in DCU, went on to do a PhD in biochemistry, but don't ask me what it's about because I actually can't remember at this point. And then, you know, my whole goal was to be a professor. I wanted to lecture, I wanted my research lab, that's what I wanted to do. But as I went down that road, I realized it just wasn't for me, and then kind of thought, oh God, like what can I do? Where do I go from here? But luckily for me, when you're doing a PhD, you know, you're developing all these transversal skills. So in terms of program management, a lot of resilience, you know, a lot of problem solving when you're doing a PhD, a lot of communication in terms of presenting your work, collaboration, working as a team, all these things that I hope make a really good program manager. So having those skills allowed me to kind of pivot into a career in program management, and I've worked for Research Ireland in their policy department. I've worked as a grants manager for a breast cancer diagnostics startup. I've worked on Athena Swan, you know, around kind of gender representation. So really interesting career, and then happily landed here in the RDS now for the last few years. Where I'm just loving sharing my love of science with the next generation in an engaging and an inclusive way. So, you know, it actually kind of hopefully does show the value of transversal skills, kind of.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting, you know, how now actually you're using a lot of that learning and a lot of those skills that you developed to actually help all these, you know, these hundreds of young people actually come up and start on their journey as well. So, sorry, I might ask you the same question then, you know, about in terms of the skills again, you know, where you find yourself in the role in the RDS.
Sure. So I actually started off in business and in marketing, and then I was more interested in, I suppose, social impact and co-design and that kind of area of things, and more business ethics. So then I did a master's in sustainable development, and through that I started working in consulting, and I loved the aspect of getting to be a bit nosy and finding out different things, and the more I learned, the more I realised I didn't know, and I liked that side of it. And then I think that helps me in the RDS by working, whether it's with foresters, farmers, experts in architects and AI. It's great to just understand that I'm not the expert, but that I get to learn and get to engage them and bring everyone together to then create change, and to strengthen, I suppose. That's the RDS mission for a thriving cultural and economically country. Yeah. So I think through that we get to strengthen the SMEs, the foresters, the farmers, and being nosy helps understanding what their challenges are. Yeah, curiosity.
So I mean, I think it's really good that, you know, we take a little bit of time during our summit to hear from the voices from the RDS like yourselves, because your own skills journey and your, you know, perspectives and reflections on, you know, what we're trying to do here is so important, really. So maybe then just to sum up, I'll just it's nearly at the end now. I'll maybe just ask you both, like, just from the perspective of the session and the summit that we're in today about digital and AI and future skills, and this whole balance, I suppose, that we need to have in terms of making sure everyone is part of this in our society. What would be your one sort of main reflection or thought that you would add to before we go into the next part of the discussion?
Well, I suppose with science classes that we're really seeing a difference in the next generation. You know, it was actually developed in 2010 under a different name, but in science class we've been going since 2019, and we're really seeing kind of a change in skills development with students and with teachers when they're participating kind of repeatedly across the years. And what we're seeing is a change in what the children are asking. So, you know, we're really seeing what the children are curious about, and there's actually pieces on the tables here today. We're seeing them move from being more interested in the natural world to interested in things like digital technologies and AI. So they're not just passively engaging with these things. They want to learn more about them, and we're worried for our children, but we can also sense a little bit of worry from them as well, and something, you know, science class is giving them a little bit of agency to delve into these topics, a little bit of confidence around it, and to learn more about these topics that worry them as well. And we're also noticing a little bit in terms of the language change. So they've used to ask questions kind of very passively and observing how, but now they're really kind of interrogating claims. They're becoming more analytical, they're becoming more skeptical. You know, it used to be, how does a fish breathe underwater? But now it's something around mischief marketing, are brands telling us the truth, you know, or those questions about AI and brain rot. We're really seeing them develop. So I think it's just really important that when we talk about future skills, we talk about the early years, we talk about the young students, because we really need them to feel confident. We need them to engage in discussions about an early age, because obviously they're the ones that are going to be shaping the future as well. So we need to get them early.
Yeah, and so important, you know, that we recognise that the education journey is there, but also it continues, and it's all part of our whole lifelong learning landscape, really. But yeah, like, that's really, really important insights. And then over to yourself, Sarah.
Sure. So I think mine kind of touches on fear as well, but maybe channeling that fear into curiosity and saying maybe, well, that's not for me, I don't know about it, but maybe through this we can learn about it, and maybe it is for us. A lot of our award winners in our circular economy program came from completely different careers and then identified a problem. And, like, for example, Happy Earth, their winners last year, they were doctors and they couldn't cope with the amount of waste coming from PPE, and then they decided to learn about it, and they've now set up this amazing company. So yeah, just, I suppose, channeling fear into curiosity, I think, helps me anyway when something gets overwhelming.
Yeah, and I think that's so important, you know, that we do think about, you know, what are the opportunities, and we don't be afraid to take decisions and, you know, to take risks a little bit as well. Okay, well, thank you both so much for joining me. So I'd like you all to give a round of applause, please, to Amy and Sarah. Thank you. And thank you so much again to Amy and Sarah, who just shared a little bit of the perspective there from, really importantly, from the voices of the RDS here, and the work that you are doing to really advance the whole purpose. So before now I just introduce my very esteemed panel, I am just going to just share a few opening remarks about where we are in terms of, I suppose, the national landscape for skills, for digital, and for AI as well. And I suppose there are so many things, I suppose, that are happening at the moment. But I think what is really, really important is that it feels that there is a real currency for skills at this moment in time. And I know I'm with an audience here who is interested in skills and sees the importance of it. But maybe just to touch briefly on that very innovative skills landscape that we have in Ireland at the moment, maybe just to touch on a couple of different things. Well, first of all, I think having a National Skills Council for Ireland is of huge importance. It's not every country in, across the world or even in the EU that has made such a commitment and investment. And what we see from government as well is this huge commitment into our skills infrastructure and our skills landscape. And that does make it actually very exciting, I think, for the future. Even in Solace alone, we're the Further Education and Training Authority in Ireland, and we have over €1 billion that's entrusted to us every year to invest in further education and training programs and apprenticeship programs across the country. So I think there are lots of things that we have that is of such huge importance in terms of innovation. We've seen different things happen as well over the last number of years and even in the last number of months, and I'll be asking some of our panel members to reflect on those and tell us a little bit more about them. But even things like micro-credentials, which is really a new way of starting to learn, more bite-sized, opportunities to pick up skills across the whole tertiary education sector, in further education and higher education, and that real key link with industry and with employment. I mean, I think it is strange times to be living. Is that fair to say? Where there is so much uncertainty about what's happening maybe nationally and internationally, but I think one thing that we should be certain about is investing in our talent, investing in our industry, and thinking about real opportunities that we have, such as the National Skills Observatory, the very first observatory we will ever have in Ireland, which is currently in development. But of course, in terms of opportunities and innovation that we have with skills, there's also balance and perspective. And I think, a lot of our panel speakers will touch on that as well. And we've heard it as well from Amy and from Sarah, the importance of having that balance between innovation, between AI and all the opportunities that can give us, as well as making sure that people are given the skills and the structures and the supports that are needed in terms of overall society. So that, that bridge between making sure we're looking after people inclusively, and that's thinking about all of our skills. We talk about transversal skills, and they're really people skills. Ability to be able to change, ability to be able to communicate, think creatively, deal with pressure, all of those kind of things that are so important. So there is a balance and a perspective. And we do have certain opportunities as well to think about. We have to think about green skills as well as digital skills. And also in the balance side, some of the research and information that we have is of huge importance. So we know, for example, where the skill shortages are in terms of occupations across the country. Those skill shortages are persisting. We are seeing them continue in areas like health, in ICT, in wider in technology, in construction as well. So it's making sure that we have the balance right in terms of the skills that we're addressing. And I think also that connection between society, across society, with digital and with skills. I mean, I have here, people, and I think, we have to remember that, it's people first, really, isn't it? Skills are there to support people. So that societal impact and that societal consideration is of huge importance. And where we see some of that emerge, even in data and research and even in just day-to-day activities. So one of the things that we measure as a country, and we measure with lots of different organisations, is what employers looking for in terms of their skills when they're recruiting for jobs. And even organisations such as LinkedIn or other agencies who are collecting data in terms of what employers are seeking for. So LinkedIn have just recently reported, for example, that there is a huge increase in the skills needed in terms of relationship development. So that's back to people again. So it's this balance between, and this connection between digital and society. And then just to finish, before I introduce the panel, and I think this is really key to our discussion this afternoon, is this future focus. Because I think with so much that has changed in the world, we are at a little bit of a cusp where we have made some innovations. We have taken brave, bold steps in some areas, but in some areas maybe we still need to think about how can we change things in terms of the future. What are the new occupations? What are the new skill sets? One thing that we're seeing reported by recruitment agencies when employers are seeking for jobs is more of a hybrid occupation or hybrid roles starting to appear. So it's not just roles that require technical skills, it's technical and all those people transversal skills at the same time. So nearly hybrid opportunities, but there's so much more. So that is just a few opening remarks to get us started, and I'd now like to ask my panel members to come up and join me on the stage. So I have Dr. Kevin Marshall, Professor Joyce O'Connor and Dr. Ciarán Dunne. Thank you so much. Where really? Yeah. You okay? I'll take the water for you. I'll give you a hand. Okay. You just go in the middle there, Joe. Okay, I'll just give you your water, Joyce. Okay, so you're all very welcome to our discussion this afternoon, and already I suppose there's some areas to reflect on. We've heard our young people, and on what they're talking about. We've heard about what some of the opportunities are, what some of the challenges are as well. But I think this whole theme, future skills, bridging the digital divide, it's what we're all really interested in, isn't it? Your own perspectives that you bring, which are all very different. I think you all have different ideas and different concepts there. But I suppose maybe just to kick us off, I'll go to you first, Kevin, if that's okay.
That wasn't the plan.
Well,
change. Best laid plans.
Yeah. Well, I suppose we're being inclusive here, so I want to make sure you're involved since you're sitting furthest from me. But I think it's maybe just to kick us off. Let's talk about the opportunities. What opportunities do we have as a society when it comes to AI and digital skills? And what do you see with all the different perspectives that you bring as the key enablers and solutions that digital and AI can really deliver for us all?
Good afternoon, everyone. Delighted to be here on this beautiful day. And congratulations to Science Blast and all the phenomenal work they do. It's really, really inspiring and important. Before I answer that directly, let me just give you the perspective in terms of skills and future facing, and what we're trying to do with the National Skills Council in our engagement with government departments and everyone else, because I think it might put a better frame on where I think maybe the opportunities exist, because when you think about a future frame, it also presents some of the challenges we're facing, right? Mm-hmm. And I think what we're trying to do is for maybe the last 30 years, we've had a very solid, successful education and skills system that's got us to this point. That's fundamentally shifting in front of us. So how do we think about the future? What kind of framework that you could actually put on a page and say, okay, this is how we need to think about it? So the work we're currently doing is looking at the 4 megatrends. So decarbonization, digitization, demographics, and there's one other I can't remember. It'll come back to me.
Digital.
Deglobalization,
yeah.
Right? So you got 4 megatrends. And then how do you think of the 38 occupations based on the Solus report and go, how does each of those occupation and industries think about what it needs to do at a national level within those 4 megatrends, right? And there are different rates of change and skills within that, right? And so what we're trying to do is potentially, and we're not there yet, but trying to put that frame and have a common language to say, look, this is what's happening, these are the megatrends. So for example, there's approximately 860,000 people over 50 in the country at the moment. We have a lifelong learning stat of 16%.
Yep.
So those of you over 50, and thankfully I'm nowhere near that bracket, we're not learning, you know, and that becomes a real problem in terms of upskilling and reskilling, particularly as you think about the opportunities within green.
Yep.
Green is huge.
Yep.
And the data from your SLM or team, it's all laid out, how many jobs we need, potentially in what particular areas. So I think that's one issue. There's a gender issue, and I'm not going to talk about that. I'll let Joyce talk about the work that she's done on the gender issue. That's massive in terms of, particularly in the AI space. So, and I think what's emerging, and I think if anyone's under any doubt, just look at the ESRI and the Department of Finance report last week on the challenges and opportunities to both the labour market and our economic model in terms of AI. And you go, well, okay, what do we do about that? And I think what's emerging now is this notion that, you know, the AI digitization is not its own little vertical. It's actually a horizontal issue. And I think if you begin to think of it like that all those skills we're all going to need, or we're going to upskill at whatever stage we are over the next period to meet the demand, what's coming. And then what kind of, so there's immense opportunity there. There will be changes. So the labour market is changing. Workforce development is changing radically. I know with our work at Microsoft, we are looking at continuous improvement of processes and automating them, right? So you're also thinking about what's work like in a post-automated world. And other companies that I've talked to and listened to over the last number of months doing the same thing around their production. So it's all fundamentally shifting. So I think the real question is we need to look future focused because the opportunity's there. But how do we respond in terms of the ecosystem from an education, training and skills perspective? How do we meet that demand, and how do we need to think about the courses we provide? Because I don't think, for example, I wouldn't just do an AI course now, I would do an AI in sustainability.
Okay.
You know, I think you need to think multi-purpose, cross-functional, and then you're also going, so we held and I'll finish in this point, we held a industry forum maybe 2 weeks ago with the Minister out in TU Dublin. So all the 38 biopharma, tech, actually tech weren't there, biopharma, industry, energy, about 6 of the top, you know, sectors discussing the challenges. And the lots of different challenges individually in their own particular sectors, but key themes around transversal. Problem solving, communication, problem solving, systems thinking, core skills, and they're the ones that are outlined in the World Economic Forum report for 2030. So I think that's a really important context. And I think one of the other issues in terms of, you know, managing one's career over time is that it will not be enough to be technically the best anymore. You're going to have this balance. And I think the reframing that we're trying to think about, and we haven't solved it, or I haven't articulated well enough for advice to government, is how do we build that balance in the provision, given that the provision for the last 30 years has worked really well. It's served the country really well. We're in a really strong place. But to protect that and to build on that, we need to think differently. And I think that's the bit for me, that kind of coherence and that kind of integrated approach is what we need to do. And that's the gap we have right now.
Yeah. And I think, like, the points that you're making about, you know, AI as a skill is almost evolving into a broader skill set by itself, that it's AI and something else, you know. That's really, really important.
The tools are pervasive, right? So how do you use the tools? So we've got to teach people how to use the tools and then create the environment that they can be successful in that.
Yeah.
You know, but the difference is that it's faster than anything we've come across before. And I think that's the big thing. The pace is phenomenal, and the tech is emerging, and it's actually overwhelming.
Yeah,
you know.
And I think even the conversation is changing quite quickly.
Yeah.
Because we probably wouldn't have had that conversation about AI maybe 6 months ago. Do you know?
No.
So it actually shows that sort of pace.
We wouldn't have had that 3 years ago, even though the conversation around AI has been back since John McCarthy in the 50s.
Sometime.
Right? So like you know, there's perspective here as well.
Of course,
and there's balance.
Yeah.
But there's also an immediate concern, and that within the global context of the craziness that's going on there makes it even more challenging.
Yeah.
Because there's actually very little stability in terms of the global work we're doing.
Yeah. And, you know, all of those points are so relevant in us addressing and considering how we respond and where the best opportunities are. So maybe just going to yourself then, Joyce, as well. I mean, I suppose a little bit along the same lines, you know, there is this balance, you know, as Kevin points out as well. And it's thinking about, you know, where the opportunities are. And obviously a lot of your work is gender focused, and, you know, it is that inclusive space.
You know, thanks very much, and it's great to be here this afternoon. And congratulations to the RDS and Science Blast. I mean, you couldn't but be inspired. And in many ways, what I felt was we were seeing the future in motion, which was great. And I think, Kevin, you've given a really good context for what we're talking about today. And I'm going to emphasize again, because I think we cannot stop doing this. And I think if anything comes out of today, that everybody who leaves here says digital and AI skills is about transversal skills and a technical knowledge of whatever the technology is. Technology is changing so fast, but the transversal skills empower, enable, create the capacity to use that. And I think we need everybody to understand that. I thought it was absolutely fantastic seeing what you've been doing, but I would not take it for granted that everybody accepts that. So when they talk about AI, they think it's about the technology, it's about ChatGPT. It isn't about problem solving. It isn't about creative thinking. It isn't about communications, relationships. So I'd really like to emphasize that and think it's really important. I think what I'm really optimistic about what AI can do, and you know what AI can do? It can empower and change our lives. But we, as you said, it's about the human. And I'm going to take two areas, education. So what can it do? Often we hear about teaching and learning, but in fact now it's about learning and teaching. It's really about the learner at the center, because what AI can do, it can change how learning is designed, delivered, and experienced. So if you look at early learning, and I mean preschool early learners, it can look at development needs, language needs, but it also ensures that parents are involved, teachers and carers, and particularly family at that stage, are the enablers of that learning. But it can identify things that we haven't done before and intervene in a much more creative way that we hadn't thought about. And I think one of the studies that Block W undertook on parenting in the digital age showed that the key issue there is engagement of parents and relationships. So again, it's coming back to that. And there's a very interesting work by Paula Walsh in the Southeastern Technological University in Carlow, and she has an intervention program to intervene in early learning, but also promote STEM and STEAM. If we look at if we go on to primary level, you can see that AI can be used really effectively in numeracy, literacy, and so on. And again, there's a graduate from DCU working on her PhD using computational thinking, starting, you know, at junior level right the way up. So all these things are happening. And if we go to third level, or second level, you can see the same thing, and same in third level. But you know what's interesting, and we were talking about this a little bit beforehand, besides all that change in learning, where the learner is controlling, the lecturer, the teacher is the enabler, research is going to be changed. And I know that gentleman spoke there beforehand about research from UCD, but AI is going to enable real-time research. So Kevin is absolutely right. The future is different. We need to change our mindsets. We need to look at it in a different way, and that means there's massive change in the system for teachers, lecturers. In a way, it's a transformation of a system. It's about individuals, but it's about transformation of a system, how we facilitate learners to learn. And I can think there's probably many people in this room have talked about this for years, but now it's possible. And there's just one other area, if I can say, and it's health. Health has been transformed. We all probably know this, but if you go into a hospital now in radiology, you know, AI has transformed what they can do, but it's the radiologist who makes the decision, who understands, who is the creative thinker. Surgery. In Beaumont Hospital now, there's 3 operating theatres with robots, the third arm. It's not robots doing, you know, it's the operation. Of course, it's the surgeon. And within each operating theatre, there's one of these labs that helps them work through that beforehand. And the final one is anaesthetics. Anybody who has an operation always feels anaesthetics the worst thing, I think. They put a mask on. But now, through AI, they're using an injection, monitoring your system, so the whole thing has changed. So just in these 2 areas, you know, education and health, these things are happening. These things are happening. So we need, I think Kevin is absolutely right, the question is, how do we change the mindset? And I think everybody here is really important, because you talk to other people, you have families, you've relations, you've friends, to get people to see how important that is.
And I mean, I think you touch on so many important aspects of where AI is really benefiting society. I mean, who would have thought really that you could be going in for an operation in hospital and there would be a robotic arm or a robotic part
and
of that?
That enables, you know, operations to take place at a distance. Somebody could be in Texas and they could be in Dublin. But that third arm is used with the creativity of that surgeon. The training, the skill is different. But the skill, the individual skill is still there.
I mean, it's actually amazing when you just take a second to reflect on
I understand in Beaumont, if you go in for
happened.
some operations, they give you the option whether you can have the traditional one, which of course is more problematic when you wake up because your muscles have been torn through and all the rest of it, or the robotics. So you get the choice at this stage.
Well, as you say, we're on a little bit of a journey, aren't we? And there are. And this is what this conversation is all about. It's this balance between innovation, between creating better solutions and outcomes for people, but also the fear and the uncertainty that goes with that, and maybe the awareness through the skill side. But
now, Kevin said I might talk about, and you said might talk about gender, but I might leave
we'll
that
come back
to another stage.
We'll come back to that, because we'll definitely come back to that. But I might turn to yourself, Ciarán, then, just I suppose as part of this section on the opportunities that we have through digital and AI, and I mean, you must be delighted, with the central focus on transversal skills, because it hasn't always been like that, has it? In some ways. So
no, that's absolutely true. Thanks for having me also today. It's lovely to be here. I've been transversal skills director for 5.5 years now, and I'm full disclosure, I never heard of the word transversal before I applied for the job. And there's a lot of discussion around transversal, transferable, 21st century, human core, power skills. I don't really care what they're called, to be honest with you. I'm not tethered to any particular title apart from my job title. But the one I do push back very strongly against is the term soft skills, because there's nothing soft about those skills. But anyway, so yeah, my role and what we're doing has become much more relevant, I would say, certainly in the last year, than it was perhaps 5 years ago, when there was a lot of skepticism around it, because it's a massive change management process, and people, sometimes particularly academics, do not like change, and they definitely don't like being told what to do. I am an academic, so I'm tarring myself with that brush. But anyway, so I mean, technology at a macro, broader level exists to serve humanity, at least it should. And humans are amazing at innovation and generating new creations. We excel at that, and that's how we've reached our kind of the apex of in the globe, but compared with other species. But we're perhaps less good at using those innovations in a truly kind of appropriate and constructive and productive way. So there's myriad opportunities related to AI as a technology. The obvious ones, you know, and Kevin was talking about the recent report around, you know, finance, those type of sectors that are heavily reliant on kind of predictive, albeit complicated models, et cetera, et cetera. And then Joyce was talking about healthcare, and certainly in education, there's a huge opportunity because it offers the possibility of customizing a learning journey. Because the problem with academia is that, you know, people who end up working in academia, like myself, typically handled the traditional model of learning and examination well. And so we then struggle, why can't everyone be like us? We teach the way we like to learn, and so we definitely have to customize that and adjust it. And there's massive opportunities for that with AI. So I think that a key concept here is the idea of affordances. So the ability to identify the affordances of a technology as it relates to your specific discipline. So you do need some sort of disciplinary knowledge and expertise in order to understand and identify the affordances and how they can be applied. And the example I use with my students very often is the idea of free running or parkour, which emerged out of France. And so when I'd go into a playground with my kids, you know, I just see, oh, there's a swing and there's a slide, and don't fall off that. And like someone who's into parkour or free running, they would just see this huge number of affordances for how they could use this environment. So, but you do need that discipline knowledge to be able to identify the affordances. So it's very much this kind of complementarity. You could see it as a polarity where there's a tension between the two. And certainly when I started doing this role, the kind of the constant, or perhaps not constant, very common narrative I was coming up against was a zero-sum game mindset. So we can't introduce creative thinking or ethical decision-making into this module because it'll cannibalize our subject expertise. And I'm saying, no, we need to think differently around this. They don't have to be you know, in opposition to each other. So I think there's tons of opportunities, but I think Kevin touched on a really important point there around the idea of overwhelm, because as I said, technology exists or should exist to serve humanity. And then I think we need to be honest and reflect in certainly the last 30 years or perhaps longer, but certainly the last 30 years, you know, as our relationship with technology becomes increasingly intimate and our reliance on technology becomes more and more endemic, you could argue, to what extent is that really the case? Are we outsourcing some of our fundamental human capabilities to technology? And the irony is that the more we do that, the less capable we are to deal with the level of uncertainty and rapid change that's happening. And you know, from a biological perspective, humans have not evolved to handle this level of hyper novelty and hyper stimulation. So like if the human evolution was over 24 hours, you know, the internet was invented, you know, 2 seconds before midnight. So biologically, yeah, we can do tons and tons of stuff with AI, but as humans, I would question whether we can actually handle that level of overwhelm. So my kind of thinking on AI would be, there's tons of opportunities, but it's not about doing more. I would say it's about, doing things better. I think that's a really key message.
Yeah. And I mean, I think you bring in lots of interesting concepts there as well, kind of more the scientific approach, so any of us, as a parent bringing children into a park, I mean, they tend to just run off on you anyway, but it's, it's interesting, thinking about the different skills that people bring to different perspectives, that someone might see, the swing and say, don't go on that, you'll fall off, someone else is happy with it, and someone else is seeing all these different possibilities that could emerge from it. And I think that's a perfect example of whatever way we're going to call this. We'll call it transversal for now, but yes, there are so many different ways to describe this, but that's a perfect example of showing how the person is being responsible for their perspective and their decisions, and I think that's really important as well. Maybe we'll just stay with you for a second then. And I mean, I think people will be very interested in the work that you have actually been leading, Ciarán, as well in DCU, and this, I suppose, how has it worked, and how have you been bringing these skills into the academic career, of so many different students. And also, I know there's kind of new innovations that you've been working on recently as well, which I think people will be interested to hear about. But maybe if you tell us a little bit about how you've been so successful in the work you've been leading there.
It's been a very steep learning curve because there wasn't precedent around this. I am actually the only transversal skills director in the world, which is so there was no one to but there was no one
so
to.
We're among greatness.
Hey, well, no, I don't. What I mean by that is that's why this learning curve was so steep. I don't mean that in a hubristic way at any of that. It's a crazy job title, like snake milker and innovation Sherpa and all these job titles. Anyway. So my job essentially has been to identify skills that we think all students and graduates should have, figure out what they mean, how to define them, how to operationalize them, how to map them, how to prioritize them, how to integrate them, how to assess them, and how to evidence them. And that's quite a big departure for higher education, but it's really, really important. And like when we started this 5+ years ago, in many ways, DCU, was in a good place. You could certainly construct a very compelling narrative for DCU being in a good place. And so why would we introduce this level of the biggest innovation in teaching and learning in the history of our university? And we're doing it during COVID, I should hasten to add. So the first year and a half was entirely online. But a book I really like is Charles Handy's book called The Second Curve, and the idea that you need to introduce a new initiative before your existing main initiative reaches a peak or starts to decline, because then you won't have the resources to do it. And so it's hard to pitch an idea when things seem to be going well. It can even seem not particularly intuitive, but it's really important to do it. Equally, you need to respect and acknowledge the fact that innovation fatigue is a real thing. In lots of different industries, and we have to be mindful of that people have very legitimate concerns around change, and you need to be able to articulate a very compelling rationale for why this change is relevant or is needed. And so in our case, higher education, every sector faces different factors of disruption, but in higher education we face diversification, so there's organizations like Coursera, Alphabet, Meta, Udemy, LinkedIn Learning, whatever the case, they're becoming active in a space that historically they've no footprint in. Graduates are changing career more often than ever before. Amy was talking about that. I myself, I've had a circuitous route. So if they're changing career, while it's good to have a discipline expertise, it's equally important to have these kind of horizontal skills with you. Employers are shifting towards a skills-first recruitment model. Knowledge is being depreciated in relative terms because now you can access more or less any information you want in real time from a mobile device anywhere in the world. The idea of lifelong learning, Kevin was talking about, so moving away from kind of short-term ephemeral exchanges to lifelong or lasting relationships. So universities and higher education institutions have to factor in all of these things and relate them to our mission. And my fundamental aim is to help our students to thrive within the context of rapid change. So for me, thriving is that someone has the ability to imagine, to pursue, and to realize the life that they have reason to value, and importantly, is of value to society also. And so when we look around the world, and we look at the different challenges and problems we face in the world, and there are many, and there's lots of good stuff as well, I hasten to add. I'm not trying to be all this, what's it called? The opposite to placebo. Nocebo effect. Yeah, being very negative. I'm not trying to be like that.
It's a new one on me.
Yeah, no, it's a word.
You're just making stuff.
I know it's a word. Anyway, but the point is that the reality is that nearly every challenge we face in the world at a local, national, or global issue stems from a lack of these transversal skills. A lack of leadership, ethical decision making, creative thinking, critical thinking, sustainability, literacy, all of these skills. And so what's strange is there's this kind of knowing-doing gap. Like, if we know, humans are so curious, like, or as in we're a curious species how we behave. If we know this is what we need, why aren't we doing it? Exactly. And so we're trying to lead the way, I think, on that, to really give our students and our graduates the ability to be impactful change makers in society by having those skills. And again, Kevin and Joyce as well pointed out this idea of interdisciplinarity, that you need to combine, your discipline with other disciplines, and the fact that solutions cannot be found, within the parameters of specific disciplines. They exist at the nexus, the point of intersection, and so that's what we're trying to encourage. But I do think one thing I should have mentioned also, when we're talking about the digital divide, there is a serious issue, and Kevin and myself, it's come up in the National Skills Council around like fundamental issues around literacy in society, in Irish society. And so how can people actually engage with technology when they lack basic literacy? And so I think it'll be really interesting to see, could we use AI to actually help address the issue of literacy, foundational literacy, numeracy, and reading in society? I think that's a huge thing.
And I mean, first of all, congratulations on the work that you have led. I mean, I think it was ahead of its time. It was very innovative, and kudos for starting it during the time we were in a pandemic as well. But I think like taking that lead and looking at what we're offering through the education system and building in those skills that we know is helping to drive our future generations. Like I think that's incredibly important. And I know you have you've just created the new platform as well, the My Skills digital platform.
Yeah. So basically, as I said, my job remit is to identify skills and integrate them, and that's all well and good. And we're not saying that critical thinking hasn't been central to higher education for centuries. Just to be very clear, it's around surfacing examples of good practice, but also integrating certain skills that perhaps were orbiting around or were secondary importance in certain areas. But the key thing here was, how can we evidence the fact? How can we actually evidence the fact that students are developing these skills in a rigorous, robust, and transparent way? And part of that was to respond to the frustration of employers who, when they get CVs, and they're getting more and more CVs now thanks to AI.
Exactly.
So when everyone says they're a creative thinker and they're good at teamwork and all this type of stuff, and they're fantastic at communication, how can you actually provide some substance behind that? So now what we've done is we've operationalized the skills, we've integrated them formally into program structures, into modules. We have universal rubrics, so all students are assessed on exactly the same rubrics to determine what level they're at. And then crucially, those results are captured in our My Skills platform. So when a student or a graduate is applying for a role, they can generate a personalized and customizable skills report based on the formal assessment of their skills within their program structures. But also they can self-report on their skills as well, and they can submit that to a potential employer. So the potential employer can see almost immediately where this student is at, what their skills are, and what their level of competence is in those skills. So that's a real kind of game changer, I think, at a national and international level. I'm doing a lot of work with universities in the States at the moment who are interested in that.
And I think it's important to mention that, and I think also that may be part of the the solution that we're all looking for in terms of the digital divide, because it's going to give us data and evidence that will help to further explore that and to look at what we need to do with, and empowering the students as well, I think is very important. So maybe then, maybe go back to yourself, Joyce, now, because we're sort of in that debate about the divide.
Yes.
And, the divide it's not a linear divide, is it? It's for many different reasons. It can be environmental, it can be gender, it can be socio-economic background,
exactly,
it can be just, the luck of the draw sometimes where people get an opportunity. But I mean, Black W has done really, really important research just recently, and it's, it's about squandered skills. And I think, kudos to Black W for leading out on something so important, where we have research, it's research that we've never really seen before, actually, in Ireland, where it showed us that there was this real, in Ireland particularly, this real gender divide between digital skills at work. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that and some of your other work?
If I could just say a little bit about Black W. Black W, I think Kevin mentioned, I think, as one of your kind of key areas was talent. But Black W is really about maximising talent. And we're looking at that gender divide for girls and women. And we'd really like to reframe this, not just as gender, but as a really central issue for the economy and for society. It's about competition, it's about resilience, it's about, productivity. It's a strategic issue for Ireland and indeed Europe, that we actually maximise talent in our workforce. I'm really concerned today that actually when you talk about gender, it's seen, well, yes, of course, we know that. But it's kind of, that's happening. We've tried a lot, and I think in STEM, our figures are good. We still need to do a lot, but we really need to know, what's happening in the workforce in a real sense. So Block W is about addressing that. We've 3 pillars: advocacy and partnership. We advocate, obviously, policy change and partners. We showcase role models. I have to say, both women and men in role models, but also undertake research. So we've undertaken this research, which we asked the SRI to deliver, and they worked on the European Jobs and Skills Survey. And this was for all of Europe. And they looked at, for the first time, this work has been done on who does what in the workforce. We know a lot about the number of girls and women who have qualifications, who do, those kind of indicators, but we really don't know what's happening in the workforce. And the SRI developed an index on basic skills, intermediate skills, and advanced digital skills. And interestingly enough, now, and this was for Ireland and the whole of Europe, the 27 member states. And what was interesting was on basic skills, women were a little bit ahead of men, but that was fine. On intermediate skills, there was a slight increase for men, but not significant. But in advanced digital skills, what was absolutely amazing was Ireland was a total outrider, in the sense that men in Ireland are twice as likely than men in Europe to be working in advanced digital skills. That was number one. Women, there was a big divide. There was a really big, over 20% divide in terms of women using advanced digital skills. But what was very interesting, in Europe, if women were educated, that was a predictor that they would use advanced digital skills. In Ireland, that was not the case. It didn't actually help us understand what's happening. Now, for me, that says a big question and raises an issue. It means we've talent. We're not using it. And that the issue is about opportunity, and that what we need now to do is, I think Kevin said that, look at how we're intervening in this issue just in a different way. We offer courses that are available on single topics. It could be leadership, it could be digital skills, it could be all of those things. But in actual fact, what we're not looking at is what's happening in the workplace. We're not looking at job design, progression pathways, who's being promoted, how is that happening? And we still, there's questions, and we're following this up on why is it in Ireland? Now, this is only happening in Ireland, it's not happening in the rest of Europe. Why is it in Ireland that women who have gone through with a lot of expense from the state, right through the STEM pathway, into college, qualified and got their degree, got into the workplace, and their skills aren't being used? I mean, that is really, I think, a serious issue. So we have to explore that, and you may have comments on why that may be, but we're looking at the next phase, whether it's leadership, whether it's job satisfaction, whether it's wages, whether it's access to training and mentorship. But it does tell us something, that often what we assume is going to happen doesn't happen, and that we really need evidence-based policy to intervene in this new world. You could say that always happened, that women's skills were underutilised for one reason or another, but now we need those skills. And if Ireland is going to be strategic, and if there's a skills shortage, which I think we'll have in the next number of years, certainly by 2030, we will have to do something to intervene in that.
And I mean, I think it's so important that we engage with this, because sometimes research and data, as in this case, revealed something that we didn't actually know.
Exactly.
And we still don't know.
Yeah.
So we know it's there, and there is this opportunity to explore why.
Yeah.
And I mean, that report is available, so people can find it, the Squandered Skills Report by Black W, and you can have a look at it yourself. But you know,
I should say that's on our website,
it is, yeah.
blackw.ie, if you want to look at it. But I think that is an interesting question, and we may discuss it later. You know, when evidence is produced, do policymakers use it? Now,
don't look at me.
Well, I know you're going to do something about it, Kevin. But seriously, with the Skills Observatory now, I think there's, things coming together. But I think we do need to be proactive. But I also should say, and there's a number of women here, women also need, to be proactive themselves, to, become visible, talk about their work, raise their hands, do things, and that often the confidence comes after, you've done that. So women, but I think policymakers, any employers here, that job design, that intervention in the workplace, and a lot of courses and providers don't operate in the workplace. But there's good news in that. Interestingly enough, in financial services area, there's a very good initiative supported by government and operated obviously by the industry, called 100 Women in Finance. So it's for women in financial services. And they've got, this program was established in the US back in 2000, so it's been operating internationally for a long time, but was introduced here in the financial service strategy. And basically what is happening, there's over 100 companies supported by the funds industry, the Banks and Payment Federation and so on, that that each company has a particular program around sponsorship, mentorship, upskilling, leadership, and it starts at entry level, mid-level, and senior level. And the ESRI are actually monitoring that, and that's where the government is paying for that measurement.
Yeah.
And they showed after 3 years there is a major improvement, particularly at the senior level. So interventions do matter, but they have to be tailored. They're not going to be the traditional way of taking courses and doing things.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's a great example of where we needed evidence and we got evidence.
Yeah.
And I mean, the importance of data research, questioning the research that we have.
As
you
those
know,
children did, you know, they
absolutely.
asked those questions.
We
That's what we're asking them.
learn
Exactly.
from you know, our young people in the country. Now, I will be coming soon to take questions, so if you want to start thinking about any questions that you have for our panel. But I'm going to go back to yourself, Kevin, first. So I suppose thinking about some of the initiatives that are recent in terms of AI and digital, we've seen some great initiatives just even in recent weeks and recent months, such as the new AI micro-qualifications. I mean, that's one real step forward, I think, in terms of building our awareness and the digital literacy. That's going to be so important, you know, when we think of the divide. Do you want to mention that and maybe any other initiatives that you think are really key to kind of our future discussion here?
Yeah, so I mean, we're not short of initiatives, actually. No. And that's a problem.
Too many, yeah.
Right, because they're not coordinated and they're not cohesive enough. My bugbear. So, but having said that, some of them are really good. Yeah. So, for example, the partnership with Solus, we have 4 courses at level 4, 5, and 2 at 6. Microcreds, 12-week courses, consortia-led content, really, really good stuff. Running out through the ETBs. So I think there's some really good stuff with SkillNets for the SME sector. There's really good stuff in the universities. There's good stuff in Cedar. What there's missing is there's no window in, or no, window's probably the wrong word, no door in. All right, so hopefully this Wednesday, tomorrow week, the department will launch AIready.ie, which is a single portal with 4 courses on it aimed at the general public. AI in your life, AI in work. I can only remember 2 things at a time. This is the age thing, going back to that. Career is the other one. So, and the idea is they're very simple, short courses that we're going to put in a radio campaign, we're going to put in social media and go, look, if you don't know anything about this stuff, go here. Try this stuff. It's simple. I looked at one of them last night. It's 3 10 minutes, right? And it's a start, right? And then the idea would be, over time, this is phase 1, and then phase 2 would be, okay, so you're here, and then there'd be say, well, if you want to learn more, go here. You know, go to college, go to UCD, there's some online stuff. And then if you want to go to the bigger providers, like Udemy or LinkedIn or Microsoft, more technical stuff, there's kind of a roadmap concept that at least we would try this. Now, other countries have done this.
Yep. It's up in the UK. It's running in the UK at the moment.
UK did one recently. Finland have been at this since 2019.
Yep.
Singapore, you know, India. It's for me, it's more about, well, if no one goes through the front door, well, we got a real problem, right? And I think, you know, having said that, you know, come back to the kind of social cohesion, social inclusion piece. We've got a real problem there, right? And we're not tackling it in probably as coherent and strategic ways that we might think about. And that's been going on for a long time. But I think the challenge with this emerging tech is that those who are heretofore have not accessed some of this stuff are going to be further left behind. And
that's the danger.
That's a real danger, right? The second thing that's emerged from the data in the last year or so is NEETs, not in education
or employment.
So the younger folk with no qualifications, not engaged in work, that number is beginning to rise. It's really problematic up north. Actually, it's at about 20%. It's not that high here. It's about 6, I think. But it's growing,
it is,
right? And to me, that's
increasing.
a lead indicator. That's a lead indicator. That's not a lie. That's a lead. You go. Okay, we've got to do something about that. So I think and I think that's, that needs a bit of thought. And like, okay, we have all the all strategy and the literacy strategy. Okay, if it's not working, how do we pivot? Goes back to, like, we have loads of data.
Yes,
we have more data that we just do not have it put together in a way that is accessible, I think, to policymakers. So you look at your stuff from SLMRU, it's brilliant, but it's 250 pages, right? And only recovering statisticians like me will look at that. But most people go, there's no way. And even I get, you kind of go, no. So there is a storytelling stuff, and even Joyce's stuff is brilliant, but it's
the accessible.
It's only 48 pages.
I know, but you have too many indexes in the sense. But But I mean, I think so. I think there's a storytelling that makes it easier to say, well, how are we going to tackle this, and how are we going to and it's about it's messages to government in a way that's like, if we don't do this is the thing, and there's so much going on at the moment, and they're so distracted that. And is that and it's not across government. I mean, it's within the central government. And how do we have to release more money? What does that look like? You saw all the stuff that went on last week. Okay, this is human capital is human infrastructure. This infrastructure is as important as the infrastructure report that sits in deeper, because you know what? If we don't have the skills, you ain't going to build any of this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's a bit of that. I also just to say that I think. The AI stuff is phenomenal. However, we have to be really careful and thoughtful in its uses. We have to ensure, language around guardrails and the dangers, that we're all educated in that as well, as equal as the good stuff. And there are bad actors out there, so we have to be really careful. Businesses have to be really sure that they have a data strategy. They have a security strategy before they put any of this stuff on it. They have to be really clear. I think as individuals, the same thing is true. And go back to the comment about sums. AI models are just regression equations on steroids. So we just need to have a balanced conversation, but we need to educate ourselves, all of us.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I'm beginning to shift away from is this AI as sort of education and training. More so, it's in terms of how you reach people. It's more a consumer campaign.
Exactly.
And that's like, I don't think like that. I mean, you have to get expertise, and someone said to me, like, consumer behavior, consumers, it's a different way to get at them, to market at them. And I think we have to think about it like that. It's because courses and education can turn people off, and so I think that's really important. And then the final thing I'll say is, I'm just looking at all the books.
Yeah.
Like, it's really important that critical thinking is developed by reading.
Yeah.
That's why we're in the
failed
library.
with my children to get them to, but I think that we, there's some core principles that we also still need to hold on, that are fundamental to us as humans, fundamental to us as society, that develop these skills and have done so for centuries. That let's not be completely, it's all AI. It's not, so it's, but the only way that balance settles is through education and awareness and conversation.
Yeah. I mean, so many important points there, to touch on. But yes, bringing attention to where we are, surrounded by books, where have we got to? Of almost 300 years of the RDS.
AI won't get you through your law exam, but won't get me through my corporate governance exam on Monday.
I know.
Boost.
But certainly some of those things you mentioned, the AIready.ie platform, huge innovation. Also the ALL strategy, the Adult Literacy for Life strategy, a 10-year commitment by government to help adults with literacy, with numeracy, with digital literacy as well, hugely important as well. And of course that very, very important aspect of AI and digital, which is the ethical side to it, the safeguards. And I mean, I think Ireland actually are stepping up. I think we're one of the first countries to establish our AI office, which will be operational by the 1st of August here. And that's hugely important in terms of balancing that divide as well, and that connection with society and culture, that we will have that ethical approach here in Ireland, because that is fundamental given what we've seen in some of the recent events. But I'm going to pause, because I know I have some time now to see if anyone would like to join us in the conversation. Oh, I've loads of hands going up. Okay, so I think we might have a microphone. We've got Sarah, yes. So.
Hello, thanks very much, everyone. Jonathan is my name. You've provoked a lot of questions, and thanks for being on what I call the bleeding edge of what we're doing. One of the important things for me, I'm in technology and science my whole life, and the amount of information that I've been able to get with AI over the past couple of years has been incredible. About 2 years ago, I could produce a report that I would have to think about for a week. And then I started doing that more and more. And my ego took a hit. And I actually was resentful against AI. And part of actually getting really, really fluent, I use it every day, it's part of multiple bots all the time, was actually accepting that emotionally, the amount of information is okay to accept. And then my ability to take in that information accelerated enormously. So it's not just knowledge skills, it's also acceptance skills. That I probably digest 20 times more information now than I did 2 years ago when that incident happened to me. But this is when you really start to get fluent. So there are fundamental human things, and I was thinking about the transversal skills. How do we take that into account as well? People are not used to this level of information and processing it. But we actually do have to process more now, whether we want it or not. So it's kind of, how is that human element being addressed? And you've provoked 20 questions. I just had to pick one, guys. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Ciarán, you touched on that, didn't you? You know, like our ability to be able to process the pace, the volume, the level, you know.
Yeah, I mean, like information and knowledge is amazing, and having the potential there to, you know, to consume vast amounts of content is incredibly seductive. And I think one of the things around AI in particular is the seductive nature of it, where it offers you kind of the view without the climb, but without recognizing the craft of the climb. The process of the climb is where you really forge your skills, where you make meaning, where you can cultivate your own identity, all of these really important things. And I think, going back to your question, I think that point around, you know, your ego takes a hit and where do I fit in the world? And, you know, I think in terms of future skills, skills like meaning making, you know, like where do we find meaning? It might seem like a strange skill, but I think it probably will be a really fundamental existential question for lots of people in the future. I think boredom as a skill, believe it or not, I had a conversation with my son.
Switch off.
Yeah, I had a conversation with my son a couple of weeks ago during the Easter holidays around him being bored, and like explaining how important it is to be bored, and it's not some sort of chronic fundamental failing of parenting.
Did you grow up in the 80s?
Yeah, exactly. He's sick of me saying the 80s. So, but I do think that's absolutely key, that kind of the craft of the climb, and not, you know, there may be agentic AI, but that doesn't mean that we as humans abdicate our own agency in a voluntary way. And that's really, really key. And another key concept, I think, is around trust as well. Because, you know, a lot of our trust in traditional institutions, be it the government or the media or the church or whatever it is, has been sundering and reducing in recent years. And then within the context of AI and deep fakes and disinformation and all the level of it's coming at us, you know, what do we actually trust in? And trust is kind of like a healthy relationship with uncertainty. But if our trust reduces, then we're going to have a much more unhealthy relationship with uncertainty, which just feeds into anxiety. And it's no surprise we have like epidemics of anxiety. You know, and I sound very I don't mean to sound negative, but I think it's really important. You know, this is a technology. Bill Gates referred to it like nuclear energy, like plutonium. It has lots of potential opportunities and affordances, but it needs to be handled in a very kind of conscious, deliberate and purposeful way. And that's It behoves us to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
And if I just come in, that's what you said about trust is terribly important, and it somewhat relates to what you're saying, Kevin, about policymakers and politicians, that you have to create an environment of trust and how you're communicating your message about this technology, what your expectation is. And in some ways, when you were speaking, I just thought, often we're encouraged to listen more, but actually we need also to reflect more when we're looking at this data. That's a skill, as you say, in itself. So it's getting in that learning, that calmness, that the solution hasn't been produced right away. We have to reflect on it, see what it is, but we do have to trust in it, and that's critical. And I think it's not just trust in AI, it's trust in where that information is coming from and in the society we're living in.
Okay, I'll maybe just take another couple of questions if you want to add anything, Kevin. No, okay, yeah. So I'll maybe just take maybe 2 or 3 questions. Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, Jason Cuddy, Skills Vista. How can we get better at everything that we're doing? So I don't think ed technology has evolved the way it should, or the way it can, where we can get it to. What I mean by that is, imagine if we could get industry insights quicker. That information could be fed in real time to colleges, universities, training providers, so they can create their content or improve or update their curriculum, so the academic councils would sit quicker, so that graduates coming out of, we'd say, DCU are more in line with industry needs, etc. And I'm delighted to hear of obviously all the improvements, because transversal skills is where it's at. It's where it's going to give us professional agility, which gives us business agility, which then gives us a more economical, resilient Ireland. And then obviously, Kevin, you've kind of spoken about various different things, but how can we connect it in a better way? Because 3 years ago, Simon Harris put Find the Right Course on a website, a government website. I'm delighted to hear, obviously, that they're launching the AI skills part. Yeah. But like, is that going to come with a QR code that we can scan? Or will people even understand if it comes out with a QR code that you can scan and download an app to be able to see those 3 courses? So like, how can we connect policy in with, real positive change? Like sorry, just one last thing, and I suppose we've actually combined all of the actual courses from the Education Training Board, micro-credentials, colleges, ETBs, all onto one central system to make the learning journey easier for people, because you'd want a PhD in learning and development to understand where you go for different courses to bridge a particular skills gap.
Yeah.
So thank you for a question. I might just take a couple of questions, and then I'll just let the panel address all of them, because I knew there was a few hands up. Okay, so yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Hi, my name is Handa. This is very thought-provoking seminar. Thank you very much. So I just want to give a context. I want to ask about the early adopter and the reluctant adopter. So the early adopter, this is the population that we are talking about in this seminar, is about 13.5% who are like open for innovation. Yeah. And then there is this reluctant adopter who's like about 35%, if I'm not mistaken. And then, so my question is, in this transformation era, how do we address this reluctant adopter? Because some of the reason not adopting AI is because the sustainability issues, the energy consumption caused by AI. But we want to also minimize the gap between the early adopter and the reluctant adopter. So how do you address this issue? Thank you.
Okay, another good question. And I think Geraldine has one at the back. I might just go to Geraldine. And then I will come back. So I'll let you go with those 3 questions first, and then I will come back.
Thanks. A question, but first just to comment from the RDS perspective that our forefathers over 300 years ago were dealing with similar challenges of a different nature in terms of low productivity, really poor access to education, and lots of systemic issues in the economy. And they responded through transversal thinking at the time, if you look around you. So I think, really what has changed, I think education hasn't served us well in some of the ways that we've developed, a linear way of evaluating students. And my question is around, if second curve is to happen, we need to move at speed. And the educational system, in terms of the pace, is it able to actually deliver that change in a timely fashion, AI is moving beyond the speed of light. And the question I have is, are we actually recognizing at the same time, these transversal skills in our students? Because I have a lad finishing up this year, and he and his cohort in UCD are all very, I would say, just a bit dramatically underwhelmed by their prospects, because the messaging is really, I suppose, very poor for them at the moment. And I'm telling him, no, you've got to trust yourself, back to trust and values and ethics and those transversal skills. So my question is really, are we doing enough at speed to embed them, to value them, and to communicate that?
Okay, thank you so much. So a couple of really good questions there. Kevin, you look like you're ready to answer.
Well, the answer to that question is no, we're not.
No, yeah,
okay.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I think we all agree on that.
We need to think differently about it.
Okay.
But I think that's a systemic change that I think we're struggling with.
And the Skills Council are, you are trying to lead reform.
Our role is to give advice.
Exactly.
We can't. You can nudge. I think we nudge a little, but like this. It goes back to the mindset that we've been so successful in a particular model for such a long time that letting that go and changing is really difficult.
Yeah.
And we're protecting ourselves from the shock that's emerging, right? And I'm not so sure how we get over that.
Yeah.
What is the best way to take greater risk in what we teach and how we teach and how we integrate the subjects? I honestly don't know. I mean, I do think it's the fundamental core, because one thing that AI has done is that it's fundamentally upset the assessment system. Right, from an education perspective. So how do you know it's real? What checks and balances? Is that really the question we want? Is the old model that we have, which again has served well, is that, and you have this new tech that you don't need any of that? So I don't think we've solved that. And I think the system is it's hard. I mean, but that's the fundamental issue, right? And then how do you balance the core subjects that you would teach across primary, secondary, and third level with the skills needed, right? So no one's going to throw out the level 8 degree. I don't think any university. Well, Galway kind of said something, but I don't know. I think that was misrepresented what they said. So how do you put skills academies in parallel, right? So that something like that's needed. I think look at schools level. I mean, apart from Skills Blast and the work we do in Dreamspace in Microsoft, STEM is only will be rolled out as a national initiative in September. At primary level. So you're going So I don't know. I think it's a really good question. It's a really good point. I would hope actually. I would hope that the national conversation around education and that forum that's going on at the moment, that some of this is come out. But I worry that it won't. Right.
But I think, as you said, it's critical we keep the conversation going, and we look at the points.
But I think we also try. AI Ready is a start, but we try and open doors and say, look, go through and see. And if it doesn't work, go here. If it doesn't work, go here. We can only architect opportunity. You can't actually force. But I think the economic situation and the stuff that the central bank is a big wake-up call. Anyone want just read the executive summary and go, okay, we really got to think about this.
Okay. Maybe on the, I don't know, Joyce, you want to come in too?
I mean, I trying to speak to at least two of the questions around the idea of speed, because I think sometimes they talk about laggards or late adopters, and it's in some sort of pejorative sense, but I mean, there's value in that as well. I think there's a concern would be that we're optimizing for speed rather than quality, and the reality is that like institutions have to bring a level of rigor that like if they don't have rigor, they lose their sense of being. And I was reminded actually when Amy was talking about mischief marketing about 25 years ago in a different life, I was working in telecom sales for a .com, and I was at the launch of the BlackBerry device in the UK, and it was the most mischievous marketing. This was like, this device was going to liberate you. You know what I mean? You could now live in Barbados and do your work from the beach and sip in mojitos, and it'll all be great. And like in many ways, it wasn't. You're getting contacted at 11 o'clock on a Saturday night. By your boss type thing. So I think, I think in many ways we were kind of,
So Ciarán, where did it all go wrong?
Exactly. That's another conversation. But my point is, like, sometimes with these really emerging technologies, and it goes back to the idea of seduction. You're kind of sold freedom, but you buy servitude. And I think so. I would push back a bit against the idea of early adoption on these things. That it's a default that we should be encouraging it. I would say let's optimize for quality and ethics, but that's really hard because you hear people like Sam Altman going, move fast, break things, etc., etc., and you have a very small number of extremely powerful, unelected individuals who are profoundly changing society, and so I think we need to question that. But I agree that higher education, all education, definitely needs to change and adapt. And Kevin's bang on, like, these are slow to change. These are, by their structures, by the rigor, by just people who don't want change, all these things. But it does need to adapt, but not lose. It's that kind of polarity thinking, speed or like change versus tradition, not lose a lot of the good stuff there as well.
Yeah, and just before I go to yourself, Joyce, unbelievably, we're almost out of time. I'm so sorry, because I know we could keep this conversation going on for so much longer, but you've all stayed with us for so long, and maybe some of our speakers might stay with us if you want to have a question with us afterwards. But just to say, I'm so sorry, I'll probably not be able to go back and take any further questions, but I'll go to yourself, Joyce, because I know you want to respond.
Totally, just to, I don't want to repeat what Kevin and Ciarán has said, but I think, going back to creating the awareness, and I think your question there, don't forget voices here in the audience. We all have a voice. I think we all can't be saying it's somebody else's problem. We need to be part of the conversation and to let people know. And your son's experience is not atypical, and therefore, if others can join together, you're not asking for a solution, but you're asking the question, what can be done? And educators need to respond. And I think as Kevin and Ciarán has said, it is a big issue, but we need to change. We cannot say that it's going to take another 10 years to do something, because, AI is happening, and we just need to take confidence in our teachers and our educators to show them what's happening, the reality of jobs and change that's going to affect them. So I really think everybody should have a voice. But I just wanted to answer your question very quickly, Jason. You said, how do you, get employers' feedback, if you like? The AI observatories are being set up, something like skills observatories, and the whole idea of that is to get quick-time information or real-time information from employers. That's in the AI strategy, and that looks as if it will be set up very soon with the AI office. So I think what we can see is that AI can facilitate that communication between employers and policymakers. Kevin is right, though. We have to communicate it to policymakers in a way that makes it real. And my experience is when business talk very clearly to politicians and to policymakers, they listen.
Thank you so much for that, Joyce. And I think your point on all of us having a voice is a really, really good way to just kind of close our panel. And I'm so sorry I have to close it because I
make it one really quick.
It's really quick.
Yeah. No, just talking about Joyce was saying, because I think, when business talk to government, they listen, but like there's the third sector, the NGO sector,
yes.
As well, which is, and that voice, like we live in a society, not an economy, or we should at least, that should be our priority, I think. Absolutely. And it goes back to, that I meant to say around reimagining higher education, and it's an opportunity with AI to revisit apprenticeships and capturing skills in other areas. I know the National Youth Council of Ireland have a thing, a skills summary, which is quite similar to what we're doing. So there's loads of really good initiatives out there on that area.
Yeah, and I think, you know, through the discussion, you know, there's just so much, we've covered so much. So I'm just going to ask you all to stay with me on the stage just for a few moments, because I think Marian, the chair of the Committee for Science and Technology, is just going to close our session.
Very difficult job following such an expert discussion. Thank you to each of you for your contribution, and Shauna for pulling this together and for hosting. So maybe we'll have a little thank you to the panel, and then I'll make some concluding remarks. So my name is Marian Corcoran, and I'm delighted to chair the Science and Technology Committee, and I'm particularly delighted that we showed interdisciplinarity when our two committees decided to collaborate today between enterprise and science and technology for this event. Because maybe that shows the RDS still leading the way on thinking around convergence. I took a couple of notes, so bear with me as I reflect on the spot, Joyce. Not good, deep reflection, okay? But I'm minded to be optimistic. I have decided to be optimistic because the conversation is starting and we're seeing evidence of this interdisciplinarity. Kevin talked about the 4 mega trends. It's really good that we can summarise and recognise what's happening, and that there's a little bit of fear in the system around decarbonisation, around digitisation, demographics and deglobalisation, otherwise now the artist known as strategic autonomy. Joyce talked about mindset change and the need for thinking differently, and maybe I'd suggest it's big thinking. I would love a government that thinks big. So I think there's a real opportunity to nurture a conversation like this and to get into all the hallways around power, and it's really important. Ciarán talked about transversal skills, and I love the expression, the affordedness of a technology, because the technology is looking for a problem to solve. We start with the problem, we start with the human and the process and the data, and then the technology helps. If we allow technology to lead, we're in trouble. And around the power of our colleagues in the industry, I think it's this week Anthropic pulled the launch of their latest AI model because it's too dangerous, and it will actually wreak havoc from a cyber perspective, and they recognised it and stopped it. So this is really serious, what's happening. On the positive side, the human still matters, we heard that, and the foundations matter about literacy and numeracy. So some things haven't changed. So as we try and understand technology and what's changing, some truths still remain. Ethics, human, judgment, transversal skills, numeracy and literacy, or the sums, as was mentioned earlier. Those of you who know me know I love a bit of alliteration, but you made it very easy. So I'm going to go through a few C's today, okay? These are the words I heard. I'm not giving context because you're all here. I heard about connection, I heard about co-design, I heard about curiosity, creative thinking and critical thinking. I heard about convergence, creating capacity to change. I heard about collaboration, confidence, campaigning, the currency of the topic, the importance of change makers, the importance of cooperation and coordination, a cohesive strategy, and a consciousness and awareness of the issue. And I would add another C of competition. This is absolutely critical for Ireland, that we tackle the skills gap, and this is around economic empowerment. So thank you for the thought-provoking conversation and the little tidbits you've planted, the worms you've put in our mind that we can now go and bring out and propagate in our various networks. So human, and the other thing I've heard is that human capital and social capital is as important as infrastructure and capital. Okay, so I think that's really important. So what can we do and what can you do today? What you can do is reflect on what you've heard. Each of you have a network and have friends. So it's not them, it's us when it comes to AI. So maybe we can get comfortable, like our colleague over here, in understanding what is this capability? What does it mean for me? What does it mean for you? And to actually start the conversations, because with that, change comes slowly. But change starts with a conversation, and as our friends in BT used to say, it's good to talk. So with that, I thank you for your attention. It is a Wednesday evening, it's after 6 o'clock. You have been tremendously attentive. Again, thank you to Sarah, Amy, and all the team at the RDS who managed to get these things organised with incredible professionalism and sometimes very little support. So thank you for that. And again, thank you to our host and our panels for an excellent afternoon. So have a lovely evening, and we hope to see you maybe at another event. Cheers. Yeah.